Welcome to a free mini tutorial from AccessLearningZone.com. I'm your instructor, Richard Rost. In this lesson, we're going to learn about a very powerful function called DLOOKUP. Now, in order to use DLOOKUP, you have to know how to use a little bit of Visual Basic programming. I'm going to show you some of it in this class, but I cover lots more in detail in my Access 302 class, which we'll talk more about at the end of this tutorial. Now, here's the perfect example of when I use DLOOKUP. I've got a basic customer table where I have customer ID, first name, last name, state, address, and city of where the customer lives. I also have a service call table that has my service call ID auto number, the customer ID so I can tell which customer it is, the service date description, the service charge amount, but then I also have an address, city, state over here of where the service call took place. Now, if I just wanted to get the customer's address, I could simply look back at the customer ID record, right? I can say, okay, this is customer 5, and customer 5 happens to live here. But I might want to store a different address in here if the customer is having me service a different location, or more importantly, if the customer's address changes, that will also change the apparent address for the service call. So I need to be able to store the service address with the service call record, but I don't want to type it in twice. So what I've done here is I've created a basic service call form. Here's the service call ID, the customer in a drop-down box, the service date description, and a separate set of address boxes. Now, here's what I want to do. I want to pick a customer from this list and have their address automatically populated in these boxes. And I can do that using the DLOOKUP function. Now, for this example, I'm going to assume that you know a little bit of VBA programming and Access. You know how to get into events and use the VB editor. If not, I recommend you take my Access 301 tutorial where I cover the basics of Access Visual Basic. Alright, here I am in the Visual Basic Editor. You can see I'm in the Customer Combo After Update event. Now, what am I going to say here? I'm going to say that the address is equal to the address for this customer. Okay, what's that going to look like? Well, address, the address in the current form, equals DLOOKUP. DLOOKUP takes 3 bits of information. The first thing is, what are you looking up? I'm looking up the address field, comma, domain. What table or query are you looking it up in? Well, I'm looking it up in the customer table, so it's customer T, comma, what is my criteria? Well, the criteria is the customer ID equals whatever the current customer ID is. So I'm going to go close quotes, ampersand customer ID. That's going to get the customer ID off the current form. Alright, see how that works? It says the address field on the form is going to be equal to DLOOKUP, the address from the customer table where the customer ID equals the current customer ID. So if the current customer is 5, for example, it's going to replace this with a 5 and say customer ID equals 5. Okay? Now I can do the same thing with city and state. In fact, I'll just copy and paste this whole line, right? Copy, paste, paste. And I'll say the city equals DLOOKUP city from customer T, where the customer ID equals current customer ID, and the state equals DLOOKUP the state. Right? DLOOKUP just says go over to this table, find me this record, and bring back this field. That's all that says. Alright, let's go back over to our form. I'm going to close the property window, save the form, and let's run it and see what happens here. Alright, here's Thomas. I'm going to drop down the customer combo box, and I'll pick Sue Jones, and there's her address. Right? If you change it to a different customer, how he felt, it changes the address. And sure, you could put some code in there to not change this automatically if you want to. Maybe check and see if the address is null. But that, in a nutshell, is how the DLOOKUP function works. DLOOKUP says, find me this field from this table using this criteria. And that's all. Now, obviously, I'm just scratching the surface with the DLOOKUP function. There's a ton more that you can do with DLOOKUP. And there are also related functions like dcount and dmax and dmin and dsum that will add up all the values from a table or query. We cover a lot of these in my 300 level Access tutorials. I cover DLOOKUP in depth in Access 302. And you can find that class at my website at accesslearningzone.com /GOAC 302, where we talk about DLOOKUP and lots more. Once you figure out DLOOKUP, the rest of the D or domain functions are pretty easy to figure out. They all have their own little nuances, and I do cover them all in depth in my courses. And of course, don't forget to stop by the website and check out my free tips and tricks section at accesslearningzone.com /tips for more free tutorials just like this one.